Happy holidays, everyone. This is Tom Barnico bringing you vlog post number 5, I believe. Number 5 or number 6, I can never remember. But anyway, it's Sunday, December 26th, the day after Christmas. And as I just mentioned, happy holidays to everyone in the Tri-City Area Officials Association. I know some of you, a few of you have games this coming week between Christmas and New Year's. I personally miss the days where there used to be tournaments all over the place at different schools between Christmas and New Year's. But unfortunately, it seems like most schools have navigated away from that. So it gives us a week off in between to rest and refresh, relax a little bit, and go over some key officiating concepts. The one that I'm going to talk about today, I'd like to thank fellow basketball official Tim Inman for sending along this recommendation about secondary coverage areas. I think this is a good topic because it allows us some time to kind of absorb the material, absorb the knowledge, and think about how we can apply it once we get back on the court. So thank you, Tim, for the recommendation, especially for newer officials. I think this information is always good to go over and rehash. We talk so much about primary coverage areas. We talk so much about staying in your primary. And while that's very true, we also don't want the crew to fall apart because we are not at least aware of what our secondary coverage areas are. Here's why secondary coverage areas are important. There's a lot of times where one of the 3 officials is going to need to have their eyes on the ball, solely focused on the ball, which means that they're just seeing, maybe 1/50th of the front court when they see player and ball. There's so much other action going on. There's off-ball screens. There's post positioning. There's players spotting up for 3. There's cuts to the hoop. There's so many different things going on. But when an official has their eyes on the ball, on that matchup between ball and defender, they don't have an opportunity to see what else is going on in their periphery. Even the best officials have a very difficult time focusing on anything else besides ball and defender, which realistically they shouldn't. We want whoever has the primary coverage area of where the ball is located, that should be their one and only focus, is to ensure that there are no defensive fouls, whether it be a hand check, a hold, a block, whatever the case may be, or offensive player control foul. A player lowers his shoulder when he goes to get past his defender. A ball handler pushes off with the off arm as she tries to get space between her and her defender. So that's what the primary coverage official has to be focused on. When the ball is in their PCA, they are focused on that matchup, which means there's a lot of other things that the other 2 officials need to help out with. So that's kind of what I'm going to cover today in about 6 or 7 slides. So let's start taking a look at different scenarios. Okay, so the first scenario I want to talk about, obviously the ball is represented by this little orange circle here. And that's when the ball is in the lead's primary coverage area, pretty much right in front of the lead. There's not a lot of times where the ball is going to be this far out into the lead's primary coverage area. Most of the time you're going to see the ball down on the near lane line or closer to the basket. But the reality of the situation is that there are times when the ball is basically right in front of the lead official in their primary coverage area, and they're separated from the rest of their primary coverage area, which is near lane line to basically splitting the paint in half. What we want to do here, what we want to focus on is, as the center official, we're helping out with anything that's happening on backside. We still have our primary coverage area as the center official, where we're helping out on our side of the paint. But again, if the ball is right here in front of the lead official, if the ball is going to be located in this area, what typically happens in basketball, no matter what level, no matter what gender, everyone's going to flock to the ball, which means that a lot of the players that are located in the center's primary coverage area are going to start swarming over to what would be considered the lead's primary coverage area. So that movement, that establishment of position, whatever that looks like, the center needs to help out the lead as those players start to migrate across the lane, because the lead's not going to be able to officiate all of that because the lead has eyes on the ball. The other thing that the center needs to keep in their periphery is the secondary coverage area. If you continue to split the paint right down the middle all the way to the midline, obviously the trail has some of that coverage area, okay? Or I should say most of the coverage area on the strong side. But the center needs to be aware of, or I should say the center needs to help out the trail, covering this area probably from, free throw line, within the free throw circle, and maybe even extending out beyond the 3-point line. Again, if the ball is this deep towards the end line, there's probably not a lot of players outside the arc. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to help, as the center, we're trying to help both lead and trail pick up these defenders who are making cuts to the basket so that they can receive passes from the ball, who is basically right in front of the lead official. As the trail official, if the ball goes down here in the front court, right in front of lead, the secondary coverage area help, it comes in the form of watching what's happening in the lead's primary coverage area, specifically as it refers to kind of this near lane line into the paint, watching how players are establishing themselves in this area of the lead's primary coverage area. So this is one of many instances where, again, we have to be aware of when an official has their eyes specifically on ball and defender, and how narrow their focus becomes, how narrow their peripheral vision becomes. And when that happens, when we identify those situations, such as the ball settling in front, right in front of the lead official near the end line that the lead official is working on, that means the center and trail have to pick up a lot of this off ball movement that's going on. A lot of times I see this exact scenario happen where the ball is right in front of the lead official and the trail is still officiating this play. Now, again, this is why I put the ball inside the 3-point arc. The ball goes outside the 3-point arc. That's still the trail official's responsibility. But once the ball comes in the 3-point arc, that becomes the lead official's responsibility, which means that the trail official should come off that, because they know that the lead official has eyes on this play. They need to help the lead official with the rest of the lead's PCA, covering that up while the ball is in front of the lead and while that lead has their focus on ball and defender. And this is another reason why when the ball starts drifting out to the 3-point arc, especially if it's on lead side, if the ball's on the strong side, and I should define what I mean by strong side. When the ball is on the strong side, which means that the lead and the trail, or I should say the ball is located on the side of the court in which the lead and the trail both have coverage. If the ball gets on the strong side and it starts drifting outside of the 3-point arc, that's why it's imperative that the lead official start drifting out towards the sideline. Now, you'll remember from our trainings earlier this year, the lead official should always be one step inside the 3-point arc. The lead official should never be straddling the 3-point arc, or should never be located outside of the 3-point arc, closer to the sideline. The lead official always wants to be one step inside the 3-point line at their widest. But what that does is when the lead works that wide, the ball is probably going to If it gets entered into the lead's primary coverage area, it's probably going to be entered in a spot just like this. So it's easier for the lead to pick that up because they're already working wide and they can see how the ball gets to that place on the court. So the next scenario is this one is probably the most common out of all of the diagrams that I've prepared here. The trail official has eyes on the defender and on the ball out here at the top of the key. And again, this is where all offenses start. Ball crosses half court. 98 times out of 100, the ball is going to settle at some point right out here at the top of the key. So the trail has eyes on ball and defender, which means, again, their peripherals are kind of cut down. All right. So as the center official, obviously, we are still responsible for our entire primary coverage area. All right. Our side of the paint, in basically a third, or our third as the center official, our third of the court, all the way to the midline. What the center official needs to also be aware of is the location of the ball, because once the ball crosses over the C's near lane line extended, once it crosses over into this gray area, the C needs to pick that up. And the only time the C doesn't pick that up is if the trail has an active count going. But again, the C should always be aware of where the ball's location is if it is close to entering their PCA. If the ball is on the T sideline, center should not have to worry about where the ball is located. Why? Because the trail official has that, number one. And number two, the C is not going to be able to effectively officiate from all the way across the court. But once the ball starts migrating closer and closer to the C's primary coverage area, they at least have to understand whether the trail still has eyes on that play or not. Now, as the trail official, once that ball starts migrating towards the center's primary coverage area, you have to be cognizant and trust that your partner is going to pick that up when it enters their primary coverage area. And what I tend to do is if I'm the trail official, I don't have an active count, and the ball crosses over into the center's primary coverage area, I'm actually going to close my shoulders down by about a 30-degree angle to show that center official, hey, you have the responsibility now. I am still here to help if it re-enters my primary coverage area, but you have the ball in your primary coverage area, and I'm going to help you out by working my secondary coverage area. Okay. But again, that's, not the point of this particular diagram. The point of this particular diagram is to show that the center needs to have awareness when the ball is at the very top of the key and starts moving towards the center's primary coverage area. Not only do they have to be aware of the ball, but they have to be aware of the status of the trail's eyes on the ball and any count that may be happening as well. The lead official, once the ball is out here at the top, and we know that the trail has eyes on ball and defender, the lead needs to be a little bit more cognizant of what's happening in their periphery. So for instance, if there are two players and they are, if there's two players on outside of the 3-point arc, okay, and it's very apparent that the defender is closely guarding this offensive player as they stand outside the 3-point arc, 30 feet away from the play, I, as the lead official, am going to watch that matchup, even though it's not in my primary coverage area. Why? Because I know the trail official can't see it, number one. And number two, if they're jockeying for position 30 feet from the ball outside of the 3-point arc, chances are something is going to come out of that, whether it be a singular foul, a double foul, or hurt feelings. And everyone knows what happens later in the game as feelings get more and more hurt. It leads to technical fouls, flagrant fouls, and we want to prevent that. So as the lead official, again, I'm going to kind of try to keep my shoulders as square as possible to the court so that I can see if there's anything averse going on outside of the 3-point arc. The other thing I'm going to do as the lead official is if I can tell that the ball is moving closer and closer to the center's primary coverage area out here on the perimeter, I'm going to help that center by leaking slightly leaking slightly into the center's primary coverage area of the paint to help out in case there are offensive players that are trying to get position on defensive players in the paint. Okay, so again, I don't want you to think that the ball moving into the center's primary coverage area gives the lead free reign to basically officiate twice as much area as they're supposed to. They're not. What they are to do is they are to help out in their secondary coverage areas when they can tell that the C has an active matchup that's taking their focus away from what's going on in the paint. Now, the other thing too, as the lead official, is once this ball crosses over into the C's primary coverage area, that is going to be a trigger for me to understand, engage when it's time to make that rotation. More times than not, unless it's established early on in the game that there is a lot of passing back and forth around the perimeter where the ball doesn't really settle, once I can tell the ball's settled in the C's primary coverage area, I as the lead official am going to initiate a rotation. In fact, the center might be initiating a rotation already by taking 1 or 2 steps towards the midline to effectively officiate the ball and defender that just came into their primary coverage area. So as the lead official, I need to be aware of if the center is taking steps towards the midline, that means that the center is initiating that rotation so that they can effectively officiate that play. And I, as the lead official, need to adapt and make that rotation so that the C can take the steps out that they need to, number one. And number two, I, as the lead official, can effectively officiate this new primary coverage area. Because again, once the ball is established in the C's primary coverage area, what's typically going to happen? 6, 7, 8 players are all going to swarm to areas of the court that fall within the C's primary coverage area. So we need to officiate that better as the lead official by making that rotation so that the center's primary coverage area, actually part of it gets adopted by the lead's new primary coverage area. Next scenario, we've got the ball deep in the corner in the center's primary coverage area. Now, the very first thing that's going to happen, okay, if the ball gets this deep in the center's primary coverage area, as the lead official, we need to make that rotation as quickly as possible, unless a shot goes up. If the ball is this deep into the corner of the center's primary coverage area, that means as the lead official, if we haven't made that rotation yet, the lead official is basically useless, because chances are they're not officiating the strong side of the play anymore. And they need to make that rotation so that players that are posting up or players that are making cuts to try to receive passes from the ball that is deep in the corner, we can't officiate those if we're still on the weak side. We need to get to the strong side as much as possible. The only time that it's okay to not make that rotation when the ball is this deep is if there was a quick pass to the corner and a shot went up, right? But most of the time, 99% of the time, as the lead official, if the ball gets planted deep in this corner, it's an automatic rotation. But in the instance that it was a skip pass and a quick shot, remember, whether we're the lead, the center, or the trail official, if we have a shot that goes up in our primary coverage area, our responsibility is to protect that shooter all the way up and all the way back down to the floor. So as the center official, if I am officiating to make sure that the shooter is protected all the way up and all the way down, what does that mean? Well, it probably means that I'm missing a lot of players funneling to the basket to try to get a rebound, which means as the lead official, If I'm still over here on the weak side, shame on me, number one. But number two, I can at least make up for it by helping the center official officiate those players that are funneling to the basket, because realistically, the center won't pick up that rebounding action until very late. Typically, the ball is probably coming off the rim by the time that they watch the shooter go all the way up and protect them all the way down. And it's important to remember, as an official, when we're talking about protecting a shooter, it's not just protecting them if they were to get hit on the arm. It's protecting them when they're coming back down to the floor, and if a defender goes to block them out, or excuse me, box them out before that player returns to the floor. So if they invade the offensive player's right to verticality, that's a foul. Okay. That's the first thing. Okay. Player goes up, player's in the air, defender moves into that player's vertical space so that when the shooter comes down, they basically fall on top of a player who's trying to box them out. That's a foul on the defender. Number two, the other thing that happens, not nearly as frequently, but it does happen, is the shooter goes up, the shooter comes down. Nothing happens at first, but then once the shooter has returned to the floor, the defender, in another attempt to box out, displaces the shooter once they return to the floor. Shooter's feet are back on the floor, shot's already in the air. But for some reason or another, the defender decides that a legal box out is getting position on the shooter and then forcibly moving that shooter backwards with their body. I tend to see this a little bit more in girls than I do in boys basketball, but it happens with both genders. And hopefully I've described it well enough that it's easy to interpret. But the play that I'm talking about is shooter's back on the floor, shooter's been released, nothing left to do with the shot anymore. The defender has allowed the shooter to come back down to the floor, but their box out isn't just getting their butt into the other player and standing their ground. It's getting their butt into the other player and forcibly moving that player backwards. That's a foul. That's displacement. Okay. The other thing about this particular diagram too is if the ball is kind of in this coffin corner over here, as the trail official, if this rotation hasn't been initiated by the lead, the trail official needs to help the center official cover this outside perimeter area, because the center official, again, is so laser focused on this coffin corner over here that the trail official needs to help out in case there's off-ball screens or jockeying for position out here on the perimeter, whatever the case may be. But the trail official needs to start bleeding their secondary coverage area over into the center's primary coverage area to help out. Next scenario, now the ball has moved into the center's, it's still in the center's primary coverage area, excuse me, but now the ball has moved into the paint. Okay. And again, by now, most of the time, the lead should have made that rotation. But again, we're talking about unique scenarios that we have to be prepared for. Okay. So ball is in the paint in the center's primary coverage area. What are the responsibilities now? Well, realistically, the lead stays with their blue primary coverage area. They don't need to leak into a secondary coverage area because the center official has eyes on the post already. The lead can help with backside rebounding action, or again, off-ball screens. Another instance that you might want to look out for, this actually happened in the last game that I did last week. It's the first time I've called it in probably 2 years, but a player willingly ran out of bounds, voluntarily ran out of bounds. That's a violation. They ran out of bounds to avoid a screen, okay, which they didn't even need to do realistically. They didn't need to run out of bounds. They could have avoided the screen a number of different ways, but they ran out of bounds, and that was a violation. So as the lead official, keep your eye on that. Where the real responsibility from a secondary coverage area perspective comes into play here is the trail official. Now, the trail official has to help with the center's primary coverage area in terms of the perimeter, because the center's eyes are down in the paint. So help that center out with their primary coverage area on the perimeter. The other thing that you'll want to do too is help the lead official with areas of their primary coverage area that they might not have a great view of. So realistically, again, in this diagram, in a perfect world, the lead would be rotated over to ball side. In a somewhat optimal world, the lead would at least be closed down to the lead's near lane line, which means that there's a lot of action going on that's still happening in the lead's primary coverage area, but maybe the lead doesn't have the best look at because they're focused on making sure that if the ball swings over to their side of the paint, they know how the ball got there, number one. Number two, how the offensive player got there. Number three, how the defensive player got there. And number four, if it's a defensive player who now is the primary defender, do they have legal guarding position? So the lead is, I don't want to use the word anticipate, especially with officiating, but the lead is watching to see how players got to their primary coverage area down here in the paint, in the paint area. So the trail official has to help the lead's primary coverage area here on the backside that maybe the lead official doesn't have as good of a view on, because again, their focus is on the paint. So trail, once the ball gets down in around the basket, trail really needs to open up their peripherals. And it's not an open invitation for the trail. Oh, the ball's 3 feet from the basket, it's down in the paint, my responsibility is done with. No. In fact, the trail's responsibility probably increases in this particular situation because they have to watch players crashing to the basket. They have to watch everything that's going on besides where the ball is basically on the trail official for the most part. Another scenario, and again, another scenario that tends to happen very frequently. Ball is at the free throw line, not for a free throw, but just at the free throw line. All right, maybe the ball gets entered into the high post and the post player is standing there, waiting for offensive players to move or deciding whether they want to shoot, whatever that looks like. Okay, so in this situation, the trail and the center official probably more often than not will have 4 eyes on the ball. Okay, it is just natural for the center official to have eyes on this play because it's so close to their primary coverage area. And we as officials have been trained to protect shooters. So when we see an inherent shot that's going to go up, our eyes are going to be attracted right to that shooter, whether it's in our primary coverage area or on the borderline of our secondary coverage area. We're probably going to have eyes on that shot, which means the lead official has a lot of responsibility here when the ball enters the high post and if there is an inevitable shot. The lead has to know that the trail has eyes on the ball at the free throw line. The second thing is the lead also needs to be aware that the center probably has their eyes on the ball at the free throw line. So they need to expand their secondary coverage areas, maybe beyond the 3-point arc. Again, if there is an offensive and defensive player on the outside of the 3-point arc and they are in very close proximity to one another, I'm probably going to make sure I know what's going on in that situation as the lead official. Number two, I'm going to help the center official with any action that's happening down in the painted area. The center will probably have pretty decent peripherals on this, but again, as the lead official, I'm just helping out. And that's one of the things that I should point out that I probably should have talked about at the top of the video, and I apologize that I didn't. But the reality of the situation is when we talk about secondary coverage areas, we're talking about helping out officials with their primary coverage areas, which means if we are officiating a secondary coverage area, number one, we better be very, very sure that the official who has that primary coverage area didn't make a call for a particular reason. So let's say in this regard, I'm the lead official. The center has eyes on the ball at the free throw line. I see a foul on the opposite side of the paint, which is in the C's primary coverage area. Okay. I see a foul. I know it's a foul. I'm going to have, and this is it's a very tough concept for all officials. It's still tough for me. I've been working on it for 8 or 9 years and I still haven't gotten very good at it. Patient whistles. Allowing the primary coverage official to blow that play first. And if they don't blow that play, understanding, was there a reason they didn't blow that play? Were they screened out? Couldn't they see the foul from happening? What was the reason that they didn't call a foul of what was to you a very clear foul on that play? In that regard, if you see the foul happen and you look up instantaneously and the center official doesn't have their eyes on the play where the foul occurred, you can come in and get it, number one, but make sure that you have a patient whistle. Number two, make sure you are walking towards that play when you're making your call, because you've just entered someone else's primary coverage area, which means that you want to ensure your entire crew that there was a reason why you came into your secondary coverage area to make that call. Just because it's your secondary coverage area does not give you free rein to make calls whenever you see a foul. Give the primary coverage area official an opportunity to make that call. If any of you were at the Freeland High School training meeting, Brian Morley, one of the first PowerPoint slides that he brought up showed that I think the percentage was 80 or 85%. I can't really remember offhand, but 80 to 85% of calls that you make out of your primary coverage area are wrong. And that's from, and that's why I push so hard for officials to watch game film, because that's the only time that's going to show up. During a game, you're not really going to know. But once you get game film in front of you and you can see those situations and you can see, how the ball got to where it did, how the officials got to where they did, and you can see the actual play happen 4 or 5, 6 times over, more times than not, you will see, okay, that play that I reached into my secondary coverage area to get, that wasn't necessary. It wasn't wholly necessary to get. I probably missed that play. Okay. Now, again, we're not saying that the egregious fouls shouldn't be gotten, or we're not saying that the fouls that are clearly apparent to everyone in the gym, except maybe a screened out official, shouldn't be gotten. Not what I'm saying at all. But if you find yourself making call after call after call during a game in an area that's not your primary coverage area, I would recommend committing yourself to watching game film of that particular game to understand what it was that you saw, number one. Number two, was what you thought you saw accurate or not? And I'm not saying it will be accurate or it won't be accurate. But again, we have 3 officials for a reason. We have 3 officials so that we can have adequate coverage across the court. And if you're working a 3-person game or a 2-person game, doesn't matter. You need to trust the other officials that are on the court with you. Okay. Another scenario, ball gets within 3 to 5 feet of the basket. Lead's got eyes on it. Center's got eyes on it. What do we naturally do as a trail official? We put eyes on it. And it's not necessary in 3-person. Okay. 2-person, yeah, it's probably a little bit more necessary, but in 3-person, if the ball is where it's located in this diagram, trust me, the lead and the center both have eyes on it. So you as the trail official need to have coverage everywhere else. And this is especially important for rebounding because you're going to have players crashing the boards, running full speed from outside the 3-point arc to try to get rebounds. That's where pushes in the back happen. Okay. The other thing that you want to keep in mind here is that if there is a play around the basket and the offensive player decides to kick the ball outside of the 3-point line, chances are, as the trail official, it could very well be coming to your area, which means you need to be prepared for that. Another thing that happens many times is a player goes to crash the boards from, let's say they start from the free throw line and it's an offensive player and they start making their way to the basket to crash the boards. The defensive player obviously knows that they're going to grab a rebound. They might hold them or redirect them on their path to the basket. That's a foul. Who's going to pick that up? Not the lead, not the center, because they both have eyes on the ball. The trail official needs to be responsible for that. And this is why we push and push and push and push for trail officials to work deep, especially when a shot goes up. Okay. Because if you have to make a call 15 feet away from the basket, but you're standing at the midline, you've lost all credibility to coaches, players, people in the stands, everyone in the gym, probably your own partners. This is why we want trail officials to work from the top of the key. Have that be your settling location. And I don't mean settle, don't move. What I mean is settle at the top of the key and then work your way back out to the midline if the ball and the defender goes out towards the midline. But most other times, as the trail official, top of the key. It should almost feel like you're a second center. All right. That's the evolvement of the game. And in relation to that, that is the evolvement of officiating. So at first we were, as the trail official, we were maybe 2 to 3 steps inside the midline when I first started 20 years ago. Then about 10 years ago, or maybe 8 years ago, we got to the 28-foot line as the trail official. Now we're at the top of the key. It just gets deeper and deeper and closer to the end line. And that's by design because so much is happening now out on the perimeter, even when shots go up or the ball is 3 to 5 feet from the basket with an imminent shot coming. So please, as the trail official, work deeper so that you can be more effective when there's a cluster of 10 people and a ball within 10 feet of the basket. Okay. So, whoops, sorry about that. So that is all I have for right now. Again, hopefully everyone had a good first part of their holiday and they're getting ready for a safe and fun New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. And you'll see me back here next Sunday, the 2nd, and we'll get the season back kick-started on Monday, January 3rd. In fact, I heard someone the other day say that they had a JV game on Sunday the 2nd, which was surprising to me, but nonetheless, probably, as I mentioned earlier, not a lot of games between this week and next week. But regardless, have a safe end to your holiday season, and we'll see you back here next weekend. Take care.